Welcome, everybody, to the Dr. Leadership Lounge, where we have conversations with business leaders from all walks of life about how and why they are successful. Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Dr. Leadership Podcast. Today on the Leadership Lounge, very pumped up, got a great guy coming on today, a gentleman by the name of Keith Willis, owner of Core Management Training. He began his leadership journey in the U.S. Army, where he built and led high-performing teams under pressure. He later transitioned to corporate America, bringing a sharp focus on performance improvement across sales, operations, and training functions. In the pharmaceutical industry, Keith held roles as top-performing sales representatives, an award-winning sales manager, and a respected training leader at companies such as Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Bristol-Myers Squibb. And today, Keith works with organizations and individual leaders to uncover practical solutions that elevate performance and build stronger teams. He lives out in the Philly area with his great wife, Lori. Hey, Keith, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thanks, Brent. Really appreciate the invite. Looking forward to having a conversation. Really love the work that you're doing, helping leaders grow with grit and integrity. So I'm really excited for our conversation.
I appreciate that. I love that word grit. That's a good one, you know? Grit's a good one, and gestalt. You get that good
Yes.
German word in there, right? It's
exactly.
Oh God, where was that from? Back in like the 90s, we used grit, gestalt, and there were a couple others in our behavioral questioning stuff
Yes.
that would score on gestalt. And like the third month I was there, I finally looked up gestalt and, figure out what it was, and we'll let the audience go and look it up and figure it out. But hey, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you here as well. You know, we met here a couple weeks ago and had our preliminary call, and you've got a phenomenal background. The U.S. military, being an officer there inside the Gulf War. We'll talk a little bit more about it. But I always kind of open it up with, tell us your journey, where you are today. How'd you get to running, core management training?
Yeah. So thanks, Brent. Obviously, I started out, as a college student like everybody else and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Did ROTC and made the decision that I was going to join the Army. So my first duty station was overseas in Germany, and learned a lot of lessons there in the military. And I think one of the key messages around leadership was the importance of small teams. Nothing gets done unless it's done at the lowest levels. So usually as a new lieutenant, you're usually a platoon leader. And as a platoon leader, you've gone to your officer basic course and you still don't know a lot. You have a platoon sergeant that's been in the military for years. And if you're smart, you pay attention and listen.
You watch that guy or gal. Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. and figure out what you're doing. And generally in a platoon sergeant may have 3 or 4 squad leaders, and those squad leaders are responsible for running their squads. And so if you want something to occur, ask the squad leader to do it. So even though a lot of times the leader has responsibilities for setting the vision and those type of things, ultimately it's the lower level leaders that make those things happen.
That's where all the action happens.
Exactly. So it was one of the key lessons that I learned. And later on, I picked up this rule. It's called the Rule of 150. It's from Robin Dunbar, who was an anthropologist. And so what he said was that generally there are about 150 to 200 relationships that we can carry in our brain at one time from a relationship standpoint. So when you think about large organizations and business units and those type of things, once you get beyond that point of 150, the leader doesn't have as much control. It's a lot harder for them to be able to push their vision down. So that's why it's so important when you think about the next level of leadership that those lower level leaders are very clear about what the vision is, because they're the ones that are going to make sure that happens. And so you have to have strong leaders at those lower levels. And so I often think about those lessons that I learned early on from my time in the military. And then I think the other part of that is ultimately leaders make a big difference. They really do set the tone. You mentioned the first Gulf War, and I remember there was a helicopter unit. They were talking about the helicopters, and they weren't mission capable. They weren't ready, and so they ended up sending a unit from Germany. And I remember thinking, oh, that's a leadership issue. It has nothing to do with the helicopter.
Huh.
So interesting enough, one of the markers, in corporate America, we have markers around engagement and things like that.
Yes,
Well,
sir. Mm-hmm.
yeah, in the military, oftentimes it would be vehicle maintenance. So you had a certain percentage of your vehicles had to be mission capable. And so when there's poor maintenance, because maintenance would happen, we would have what we called PMCS, preventative maintenance checks and services every Wednesday. So we would do training in the morning and we would do PMCS in the afternoon. So units that had engagement problems, leadership problems, generally had poor maintenance.
I bet they
And
did.
so,
Yeah, makes sense.
yeah. And so I reflected upon that you had one unit stateside, not ready to go to war, poor maintenance. Big news story. I think it was on 60 Minutes or something like that. They were talking about the helicopters being a dog, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
They ended up sending a unit from Germany over to the Gulf
That was
War
ready to
because of
play.
that.
It's
Exactly.
it's funny you bring this stuff up on maintenance. First of all, in my industry that I was in forever, we utilized preventive maintenance too. But uh, I had an F-15 Screaming Eagle pilot on that had about 650 combat hours later than Gulf War One, but after no, it was Gulf War One, excuse me. And the F-15s didn't have the new technology loaded up in them yet, and they were actually putting that stuff together in Kuwait in the airfields, actually putting the black boxes and things, the pilots and munitions officers together, building the final things. So talking about maintenance on the fly, but that was just trying to get to war. You know what I mean? Trying to get it done. Now you were in ordnance, is that right?
Correct.
And we
Yeah, it
talked a
was a,
little bit about that. He wasn't carrying bombs and stuff. It was funny. After we talked last time, all I was thinking about was "Good Morning Vietnam" and the guy calling in from artillery and screaming. So, great movie. If you haven't seen it, everybody go check it out. Robin Williams, 30 some odd years old now, probably. But so you were in
yeah.
ordnance, and what did that entail?
Yeah, so we fixed equipment. So
That's why I
ordnance
brought it up. The
was,
maintenance, right? You were over
yeah,
the charge,
exactly.
making sure they were war ready.
Yeah, so there are three elements of ordnance. So there was missile maintenance, vehicle maintenance, and then explosive bomb ordnance. So I was in the vehicle maintenance piece. So I was in at the time the Core Support Command. So we did non-divisional support of non-divisional units, and so we had customers. I had automotive platoon. There was an E&E platoon, service platoon. We had tow truck. We had a support team that supported units that would go out to the field once a month that would be out for about a week or so. And when the motor pool couldn't fix the equipment, they would bring the equipment to us. So we had a deadline list. We tracked ordered parts, 30, 60, 90-day jobs, things that were over 90 were critical. We used to have this thing called shootouts.
Uh huh.
And that was a big meeting with all leadership talking about what are you doing to get this equipment fixed and back up. So those were high stake meetings and those type of things. Fortunately, I never had to go,
That's good.
but your leadership went, and so you know how stuff rolls downhill.
That's exactly the proverbial something rolls downhill. That's right.
Exactly,
And
exactly.
and during all this time in the Gulf War, you got all that beautiful time at the beach. You never knew that beach parties would be like that, but you were at the beach, right? Well, God bless you. Means a lot. Your service, and then you spun out of the military and started dipping your toes in corporate America. And did you go right into pharmaceuticals?
I did. So I worked through a junior military recruiter that recruited junior military officers. I started with a major pharma company, went through the interview process, and became a sales rep. So at the
Mm-hmm.
time, I had no idea what a pharmaceutical rep did. I had never even seen a pharmaceutical rep in a doctor's office, let alone know what samples were
Right.
or anything. And ironically, back in the day, as a part of the interview process, you used to spend a day in the
In the
field with the
field, ride
sales rep.
along. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. I don't know that I would have started because I didn't know what I signed up for.
you'd have pulled the chute, right?
Exactly. But it was a great experience. And you go from being a leader, running a platoon, being an S1 to all of a sudden you're an individual contributor trying to learn how to sell effectively and working for a district sales manager and begin to learn, the ins and outs of corporate America. So, here again, pharmaceuticals is high stress, lots of expectations to sell
Mm-hmm.
products and those type of things. So, learn a lot of leadership lessons from the variety of different leaders, district sales managers that I worked for, and they were important lessons, not only around training but showing up. We talked a little earlier about grit. You
Yep.
know,
Yep.
here one of the differences is in our industry is that the person that you're selling ultimately has to sell that to the patient. So when you
Mm-hmm.
go into a physician's office, you're not getting them to sign something that says that they're going to buy. They have to convince the patient that that patient's going to take that medication. Patient has to go through to the pharmacy. So a lot of influence
Through influence. I was
skills.
going to say you got to manage through influence. That's right.
Absolutely. So there are a lot of skills there, and it's entry level for a lot of folks into the industry.
Mm-hmm.
The question will be oftentimes, did you carry a bag? You'll notice, well, at least back in the day when I started, a good many of CEOs or people that were in senior management had all been sales reps at some point in
That's right.
time. Now
That's right.
that's a little different now, I think,
Yep. I
because
agree.
I think that with more data information, so on and so forth, marketers, you're expert marketer, and people just come from different lines of business now, more so now than they did before, which I think is a good thing. I think,
I do too.
I
I
think
do
the
too. Yeah,
yeah,
it's funny you say that. So I always say I was a field general when I led, and there's Pentagon generals too, right? And those are the people that aren't as maybe street savvy, but more maybe more analytical or more marketing side of it. And it does take a village, especially in these big organizations, to take a solution or outcomes on all the companies you work for were international, right? Globally,
yes,
you gotta have
absolutely.
all sorts of people in the room to make those things happen, for sure. And then you moved around from several different, a couple, three pharmaceutical organizations. What was the impetus of deciding? What made me think of this was a minute ago when you were saying you were taking a lot of things from different managers and different district managers you've had. And I always say to people, use your eyes and your ears, of course, to listen and watch for what you need to do and also what you don't want to do. I think that you learn as much from I'm not going to do it that way as you do from I'm going to do it that way. Do you think that's a fair statement?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a fair statement. I would say that in my experience, great leaders are far and few between.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are probably average,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have some people they're just not good at all. And then I think you have people that
Worked for a few of those.
yeah, and I think you have people that kind of fall on two ends of the spectrum. Great business leaders, not good people leaders.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have to kind of figure out where you fall. I know, unfortunately, when I was younger, I would say I was not a great people leader. When I was in the military, you're still trying to figure out your emotional intelligence and things like that. And over time, being exposed to other leaders, you figure out there are more effective ways to do it. And ultimately, this whole thing around servant leadership is so important,
Absolutely.
and being able to lead with empathy, being able to lead people with dignity and grace. Ultimately, the outcomes, you're still looking for the outcomes, but you're also helping people try to be the best version of themselves that they can be.
That's
And,
right.
and I think that's so important.
To be inspirational. That's right. It's coming up through the military too. I've talked about this before on the show, my individual weekly hits, but leadership follow from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and then it started to change. But you think like Jack Welch and these people that were the greatest CEOs ever was the commentary. It was all the mostly men at that point. There were women, but the world was a little different place. They'd come out of war. They'd either been in World War II, Korea, Vietnam. Everything was very hierarchical based. So and so tells me what to do. I tell them what to do. They tell them what to do, and that's how it worked. Today, it's far more fluid. Like you said, you were managing through influence, and things that leaders started taking on as skills, empathy, servant's attitude, true caring, emotional intelligence. Big EQ is far more important than IQ. All those things really started the studies, the psychological understanding of how the human psyche kind of works, all started taking off, and it's been very good for leadership. I said, don't get rid of the old dogs either, because there's good attributes there. The work ethic and the grind, grit, gestalt, those types of things come from those generations. But we do need to understand the people side of the business, especially as a leader. You can get people to run over the hill, or you got to, threaten to shoot them in the back to get them to go over the hill. And you don't want that. You don't want option B, in that case.
Right. Exactly.
So how did core management training come about, your leadership company? What caused that? What was the big bang of that?
I've always had a entrepreneurial spirit. Done the Amway, did the Sprint phone cards.
Yep.
Done some coaching on the side. So I think all of that was always in the background. I've always liked innovation, things that look and feel different.
Yeah.
I think that was always a challenge in corporate America. I know as much as corporate says that they like innovation, not so much is why they have innovation.
We've always done it this way, and damn it,
right.
Win or lose, we're going to keep doing it this way.
Right. Exactly. And so in my last corporate job, I like to say we left each other. Mm-hmm. I came home from vacation. My manager was trying to get a hold of me, and I kept thinking, this isn't
May
good.
Not be good. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was a correct statement. It was not good. The good news was I had a job that day, but in another 3 months I wasn't going to have a job. And it became clear after doing some interviews and things like that there were not going to be opportunities, whether they were internal or external. I was very naive around this ageism and some of the key buzzwords, lots of gas in the tank. And I felt like, I could do this on my own. And I felt like that I needed to give this a shot. If it didn't work, I could go back into corporate.
Sure, take your shot. That's right.
Exactly. I didn't want to, look up on my deathbed and realize, I should have, could have, would have.
No regrets.
So
That's right.
No regrets. So I struck out and decided to do core management training. So came up with that.
Tell us a little bit about the company. So I think you do kind of focus somewhat in the pharmaceutical or sciences area. Tell us a little bit about what the company does, what you're trying to accomplish, and so on.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think that I'm trying to help leaders and actually people that work in the corporate have a better quality of life, whether you're a manager or whether you're a salesperson or individual contributor. You're trying to feed your family. You have some goals and objectives. You have some things that you're trying to accomplish. And what you want to be able to do is have these great career experiences. I think everybody wants to look back and say, I worked on that team, and that was one of the best teams I ever worked with. Yep. We did these things. We had this fun. As you've said earlier in some of your other podcasts, we spend at least a third of our time, if not more, working.
Yep.
And so my experience has been that leadership, some of it's trained. A lot of leaders get into these positions and they've never had any training at all. And so either that or it's sporadic, it's right. A one and done.
Or only focused tactically instead of strategically, or the people skills isn't focused to, like we've already spoken about, right? It's
exactly.
Hey,
exactly.
You were a great sales rep or individual contributor. You're bound to be a great leader. And here comes failure around the first curve,
Right, exactly. So you go from being I-centric to now I got to run a team and figure out how to get the team to run together. And so, the blocking and tackling, even experienced managers struggle with. I mean, I've done workshops just on accountability. Managers think that they're having, holding people accountable, and they're not. As I heard this today, I thought it was very poignant. So one of the challenges with communication is the illusion that communication is taking place.
I like that.
And yeah. And so core management training is focused on helping managers learn those core skills. Primarily focused on first and second line managers because I think that's where companies either win or lose.
Absolutely.
And
At the
that's,
street. At the street. Absolutely.
exactly. And at those lowest levels of leadership, if you can get those people rocking and rolling, you can do amazing things with your company. You can create a developmental pipeline for people that are in those line positions and get them promoted, so on and so forth. And everything happens at the lowest level. So that's really my focus, and a lot of competency work, field coaching reports, field rides,
Mm-hmm.
just the
Mm-hmm.
basic things that a manager needs to do. Emotional intelligence. I'm a big Clifton Strengths advocate. I found that when you help people focus on their strengths, they perform at a higher level. I turned over a couple of training teams by focusing on utilizing people's strengths, getting everybody on the team promoted, being able to
Great
bring
idea.
newer people into the team. It doesn't mean that you don't focus on weaknesses. And as we like to say, a weakness is anything that gets in the way of performance.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be you're overusing a strength, or maybe you have an inherent weakness that somebody's been telling you something for the last 10, 15
Blind
years.
spots, right. Everybody
Yeah,
has those blind spots.
exactly. And maybe that's not going to get better, but maybe we can figure out, maybe there's a strength, maybe you can pair up with somebody to help you work through that takes away from your overall performance. So that's really what core management is about. My experiences with whether it be in corporate or in the military, being yelled at, dressed down, and I just don't think that's,
It's
I just
not
don't
as
think,
it doesn't get a lot done in the end.
yeah, exactly. It's
Resentment's
just
never
not,
been a big motivator.
exactly.
You
Yeah.
you resonated with me a lot. I think that, and this held true in my prior career, um, following COVID and the economic downturn. I felt it also in '08 when the big financial burden. Companies, the first thing they cut is marketing and or training because they think it's low-hanging fruit when economic times are tough or performance is not good or you're missing earnings. And I truly believe that that's when you need to double down in those two areas. Let's just talk about training from the first part, but investing in your people. All the other companies are running scared at that point. That's the time to attack. That's when you flank. That's when you go all in, and not to a situation to lose the company. I'm not saying it like that, but we had a situation in my old company, and we started doing the math, and like we haven't really invested time, brought all of our individual contributors out to our big customer experience center for like a decade. And COVID got in the way. We
Wow.
wanted to do it. So it had been like 2014 or something. This was last year in January. And I went to my leadership in Japan and said, listen, it's going to be, four or $500,000. They go, well, we can't afford to do that. And I said, we can't afford not to. We've launched 9 new products since then. We're trying to be digital services versus just hardware centric these days. And you got people that don't know how to even start to do that. So you're expecting completely earth shattering, huge results on products and services that your people have never been trained on to go to market with. How do you think that's supposed to happen? You got to kind of take the first step before you start to run. And we actually got vendors to invest in it. There's other ways to create the capital needs or the expense needs you need. But when you start looking at it, hey, you get one nice big deal at services focused on that. I trained 200 people for that number, and you have one of them do a nice deal, and you pay for the whole thing. So it's this mindset that I think everyone can kind of fight in corporate America. And I think it's great that you're taking it to them because it gets lost. We're so busy we can't take the time to invest in our people right now. We're too busy to slow down to improve. And you go, wait a second, that makes no sense.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
the competition's improving. Somebody is working today on dismantling us as an organization. We better get our spidey senses turned on
Right,
here
exactly.
and go.
Exactly.
Now you do a lot of
Exactly.
workshops. When we talked before, you said we talked a little bit about K2, the mountain, right? Mountain climbing,
Yeah.
and you even mentioned the Netflix show 14 Peaks for me to check out here. I was listening, taking notes feverishly. Um,
Very good.
yeah, tell us a little bit about this. You build a workshop and around the life sciences and things, but tell us a little bit about your K2 experiences and how you share that inside your your workshops?
Yeah, so the K2 experience is about Nims Purs. He climbs the 14 highest peaks in the world, 8,000 meters.
Damn.
So think of it this way. You know, when you're on a plane, and usually the cruising altitude is around 26, 27,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
That's how high a lot of these mountains are within, 1,000 feet, give or take. That's how
Way
high
up there.
you are,
Yeah.
way up there.
In a
And so,
non-pressurized cabin.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And so I focused on K2 because K2 is the second highest mountain in the world behind Everest, but probably the most dangerous. As somebody said that, you and I could probably get on a team and with with help be able to climb Everest,
The right
but
Sherpas, right?
yeah, with the right Sherpas. But for K2, pretty much only experts climb K2. And so when they got to K2, there were a lot of people on the mountain and they were not sure that anybody was going to be able to make the summit because of the weather. And there was a couple of areas where people had lost their lives, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And so Nims and team comes in. He tells them, he gets them all, he has a party and then he gets them all excited and everything, and then he gets all of the negative backlash, so on and so forth. He makes a decision that he's going to be on one part of the mountain like 1 or 2 in the morning when it's frozen solid, so that this ice doesn't break and crash down and cause these avalanches. And so ultimately they make the summit, and within I think 24 to 48 hours after they make the summit, another 20 folks make the summit. And so I made a decision to build the workshop around that because here we have a lot of A type personalities, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
driven people. You
Mm-hmm.
have one person that comes in where the mood is not positive. He does things a little different, but he's able to get people to follow him. So the
Followership. Yep.
question,
Yep.
followership. And so the fundamental question is, as a leader, are you worthy of being followed? And so that's part of the workshop is designed around some level of self-reflection of you as an individual leader. What am I doing to work on my own skill set? So the other part of, we talked about training, organizations being responsible. At the end of the day, you're responsible for you. And if you're responsible for you, that means that you have to focus on your own self development, focus on where your gaps are, and always constantly be working on those things, not waiting for somebody to do that for you. So when we go back to the 4 needs of followers, hope and trust are two of those big areas. And so as a leader, do people trust you? Do you provide hope for them? And so I reflect upon what Nims did as he provided people with hope as well as trust based on his background and some of
Sure.
the other mountaineering things that he had done. And then I've been reading a lot of Simon Sinek
Mm-hmm. Yep.
lately. A lot of talk about the infinite gain versus the finite gain. So I build and layer all of these different pieces into the workshop, and then did is earlier on because we had done I think a performance management workshop with this company earlier, and so I had individual coaching sessions with some of the managers that had some challenges with some of their folks, so on and so forth. And so what I did is I built cases around some of these issue situations, so on and so forth. And then we had folks go through these individual case studies as a team, talk through, what should you have done, what are things that you could be thinking about, pulling in some of these accountability pieces, so on and so forth. But ultimately, getting back to if you're going to hold people accountable, that accountability starts with you as the leader, and your ability to hold them accountable is their willingness to follow you. Because sometimes you can get people to do things they may not be willing to do because they don't believe they have the
They're
capability.
just going through the
Uh,
motions. Yeah. That's
they're
right.
going through the motions. There's the gap in their belief system, so on and so forth. But because they believe in you as the leader, because they're willing to follow you, they will do what you ask them to do. And so that really is where leadership comes in. So sometimes when you're getting resistance from an accountability standpoint and people are not doing where you've had a conversation, you've agreed upon doing so on and so forth, sometimes there's a part of it is as a leader, am I worthy, or what am I doing that's not making me worthy enough
Mm-hmm.
to be followed? Now, it's obviously more complicated than that because sometimes you have wrong people on the bus. But
Yep.
all
Yep.
things being
Wrong seat at
equal,
least. Yeah, that's right.
yeah. At the end of the day, my experience has been most people wake up and they really want to do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
They do.
Mm-hmm.
There's some gaps, challenges, and issues that we all have. We have sticking points and things that we need help with. We need several conversations, coaching sessions, so on and so forth. And I know in my own personal experience, I relied upon the belief of somebody else in me relatively to the belief that I had in myself and my own skills. So when we go back to this whole piece
Hmm.
around followership, am
Mm-hmm.
I worthy of being followed? It's why it becomes so important because there's so many more times when you don't even realize it. Your people are relying upon you around belief sets that they don't own yet, that you have to help them get to. And they're relying upon you to do that. So therefore, they need to be able to trust. They need to have hope. They need to, all of the buzzwords that we talk about leadership. That's why all of these things become so important. And yet, in servant leadership, are you there to serve? You're not there for ulterior motives to hit my goal because, if you hit your goal, I hit my goal.
Right.
There has to be a selflessness that's involved in that. So that's why the workshop, and I probably watched that Netflix documentary, I don't know, 5 or 6 times, and really felt like there were some leadership components there to be able to share with people and get them to think about, yeah, that's high stakes. When we're at work, they're not those type of high
It's
stakes,
not
but
life or
at the end
death,
of
but
the
it's a good
day,
life or not a good
yeah,
life stakes, right? That's
yeah,
self improvement, and it
exactly.
really resonates with me because you're trying to get, and especially this moving forward because someone else believes in you, right? And they understand the goals and objectives, and you're trying to absorb it, but you're trusting as you go along, right? And there's all sorts of different personalities that you engage with as a leader, and even as an individual contributor, as a seller, right? I mean, these things that are trying to create followership, that's no different than an individual contributor trying to win the opportunity with a big customer. You have to have them buy in your hope, and hope in you and trust in you. It's the same thing. You are a leader. You are impacting people because you're trying to convince people to go with you. And it's all about the people. It's all about the relationships. So it's just very
Exactly.
interesting. I think it's a great thing to look at. And accountability. For those listeners out there that don't remember, accountability is raising your hand when it doesn't go right. It's real easy to raise your hand and say I was part of the winning team. A lot of people get these alligator arms when it's suddenly an accountability question about, hey, something didn't quite go right. And that's where bravery comes in, and that's where tenacity comes in, and ownership. And you want followership as a leader? Take accountability for something you did wrong. Show um, self-deprecating humor. Show understanding that you don't have all the right answers, and you'll build that followership a lot faster than if you stand up there and think that your proverbial you know what doesn't stink and that you got all the answers. We're always all learning. Always,
Exactly.
all of us are always learning. That's what I was trying to say. This life, what we will be talking about, Keith, in 5 years from now, may not even be on a cocktail napkin yet. I mean,
Yeah,
it took
exactly.
us tens of thousands of years to develop the automobile, and 60 odd years later, depends on if you believe Mercedes did it first or who had the first automobile combustion engine, but 60 odd years later, we're in space. We're
Yeah.
on
Isn't it
rockets.
crazy?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I've told the story before. The Library of Congress took 250 years to fill up with all the periodicals, the speeches, the recordings, the books, all that stuff. That amount of data is moving on the internet today every 90 seconds.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, it's beyond exponential. There's no such thing, but I'm just trying to make a point. Now,
Oh, absolutely.
when you're dealing with leaders, and we talked about this in our prior call, but tell me a little bit about your philosophy around A players, B players, and C players, and where as a leader you want to focus.
Yeah, I think as a leader, your best opportunity to grow your business ultimately comes with your middle performers. That
Mm-hmm.
makes up about 60, maybe even 70% of the workforce that you have. Your top performers, they get the extra assignments. if you have field input teams, working with marketing, and this is from a sales perspective, and I think this probably even fits within organizations that don't do sales.
Yep.
Ultimately, those top performers get a lot of extra. Well, the other part of it is they also sometimes get overworked, so you have to be careful because
They're tapped out.
if you're,
They're
yeah,
tapped
they're
out.
tapped out.
Yeah, exactly.
And then your bottom performers, you spend extra time with them because you're trying to get rid of them. And so who gets left in the middle?
all the people that need the love and tenderness are forgotten.
Yeah, exactly. And
That's
so
funny. The bottom ones you're trying to get out. That's funny. You didn't say that when we met last time. That's a good line. I really love you here, Johnny, but let me show you the door. Do you have a box with you today? Yeah. So to talk about the middle performers, how do you coach through that? What do you explain what you mean by your biggest opportunity?
Yeah, so a generally, at least in pharma, everybody generally gets the same amount of time, but your top performers get a little extra
Mm-hmm.
exposure.
Mm-hmm.
I think with your middle performers, you have to be more explicit in regards to what you want people to do. You have to kind of coach exactly to the skill. I know that I can't remember if it's the Harvard Business Review or McKinsey reports or something, but they were talking about coaching and they're talking about coaching best practices. And when you coach to best practices, you have to coach to exactly what it is that people should do and what that best practice looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Because some people you can say do X and they'll know exactly what that means.
They
So, for
get it right.
example, yeah, you tell a sales representative you need to use your resources more effectively, and they shake their head up and down. They know what you mean. For some folks, that might mean when I say resources, I mean you need to do more lunches. You
Mm-hmm.
need to use whatever extra tools that you have in a bag. These are the 5 tools that we find, and be very very explicit about what that means. And then the follow up to that is you have to check in and you have to, and we talked about accountability, but accountability is a hands on task. That you can't wait to the next field session, which is 4 to 6 weeks away, to follow up. It might mean in the next 24 hours, I want you to send me a list of X, or, we talked about you setting up an appointment with some of these top customers. That might mean following up because I want that done in the next 24 hours. I want you to follow up, send me an email so I'll know it's done. It's not micromanagement. What gets measured gets done
Mm-hmm.
ultimately.
That's right.
And so you have to have some level of focus for that. And then the other part of this is you have to cheer for the middle folks because no one's cheering for them.
That's right. They're the forgotten sons and daughters, right? That's right.
Yeah. And it might be, I was talking to a manager and we were talking about one of their middle performers and they made a comment and they said uh, they were trying to get them to increase the number of calls that they were making a day on physicians. And I think the person had hit 8 that had a really good week. And so I asked the manager, I said, well, did you say anything to the representative? Did you let them know that
Did you
really good
positively
job?
reinforce? Right. Right.
Yeah. And they looked at me like I was crazy. I mean, it hadn't dawned on them that they needed to
Well, it's expected. Why do
reinforce
we
that.
why do we have to be nice to them? That's what the job is.
Yeah.
Well, it's just not how people work, man. This reminds me.
Exactly.
I did an episode 2 weeks ago, and it was out of gosh, I can't even remember what the source was, and it was about coaching, and it was a sports uh, approach to it. But they talked about they didn't call them A, B's, and C's, but they called them talent and mindset combination. So you have an A in talent and an A in mindset. You have A in mindset and a B in talent, and you have um, then A in mindset and a B in talent. And the AA, the top of the line mindset and the top of the line talent, as a coach or as a leader, you may go your whole career and have one, maybe two of them that you ever experience. They're just built different. They're the Michael Jordans. They're the Walter Paytons. They're the ones that work the hardest, practice the hardest, and were gifted with skills and acquired skills and continuously try to improve. They're the unicorns. So you kind of put those off to the side. Those are like A plus players. Then you have the A talent and the B mindset people. And they got all the talent in the world, but they aren't willing to, they aren't raring, they're raring to go, but can't go for raring, I say. They don't, they'll try 15 different things that they should probably work on once each. And they never develop. They have this talent and they're basically wasting it. And the thing is they're also a cancer to your team, because not having the right mindset, or thinking they don't have to practice, or they don't have to do it, or they aren't driven towards self-improvement or common goals, that can be a bad thing for you. The B players that you and I are talking about, the ones that this coach talked about specifically that are the golden opportunity, are the A mindset and the B talent. The talent you can coach up to and stuff, but they try one thing 1,000 times until they get it, because the mindset's right. Then the talent goes up and it's now a B plus. And then their mindset is right again. The talent goes to a B plus plus, and then finally reaches an A. And that's that middle people, right? The people that, they have the can do and the will do. They just need time. They need percolation, like a fine cup of coffee. You got to let it kind of brew a little bit and have this thing take off. And I think it's true on what we're kind of talking about here too, your A, B, and C players, that the C player is actually the A talent, B mindset. Now, we put up with a lot of things from people that deliver the results, right? Revenue hides sins, as I used to say. And the best thing you can ever be as a leader is to have so much talent on your team you don't have to put up with that. And you have a bench that's so strong. We had a manager of a year one time. This is 30 years ago probably. And they said, "How'd you do it?" And he goes, "Well, you got to remember, I started management 4 years ago. It took me 4 years to build this team. I turned every single person over. This team is not what I took over. This team is what I built." And he wasn't taking credit with that statement. He goes, "You can't expect this immediate gratification as a leader and as an individual contributor. It takes time. You might get lucky. You might have a big deal fall in your lap, a bluebird, whatever. And then you got to maintain the account. But life's hard. So expect it to take some time." And
exactly.
And really dedicate on continuous improvement. That's why I put this show together, is just trying to share it forward, and trying to share and bring people like yourself with all. There's so many talented people out there. Bringing someone like you on here and talking about the life sciences business and this training methodology and everything, it's great, because there's somebody driving down the road today that's a life science person. Somebody's working for, Bayer or Merck or somebody that listens to this and goes, that's a great idea. Like, Keith, I never thought of it that way. And that's all we're trying to do. You and I, just little baby steps for everybody, and hope you can give a high five at the end of the week that somebody had a good week.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And ironically, in the story that you tell, it's within those B players sometimes is your management. I mean, I think, and I'll use a sports analogy. I think about somebody like a Steve Kerr.
Yep.
B talent, A mindset.
Yep.
Great coach.
Yep. Made one really big shot too for that ring.
Yep.
On the Bulls. It is funny. And then you got great coaches that some never even played the game.
Yeah.
They understand the game, but weren't great players, just philosophically and things. It's just, I think of Tiger Woods' dad. He wasn't a big golfer, but he created the greatest golfer ever because he got his mindset right. I mean, Tiger's going out and training with SEAL teams and stuff. That's why he's got back injuries and Achilles problems. It's because he overtrained on a lot of this. And also he's ripping the club at, 125 mile an hour club head speed as he's crossing the plane at impact. I'm sitting here at 57 going, God, I'd love to be at 92 miles an hour again. Oh, God. What about, do you think it's harder today for people to take on and self-develop than it used to be? And the reason I'm asking the question is what I'm thinking about here is, in today's world, it's fake book and it's Insta-scam and everything's perfect. And if the level at which everyone is to hold themselves up to is not realistic. Beauty is not real. It's all filters. So it's all this false what good looks like. Have you found it more difficult to engage with younger people today and get them to get the mindset right and understand that perfect isn't the goal, just improvement is? Give me your thoughts on that.
I don't know that it's any more difficult now than it was then. I mean, the way I look at it is, we were them.
Yeah.
Every generation says the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They're lazy. They don't want to do this. They want to do that. I mean, it's just like really, and I've been fortunate to work with some young people. I'm uh, work with a nonprofit, Collective Success Network. We help low income first generation students,
Okay.
make their way through school with network opportunities. I'm on the advisory board, and then I've also done some work with the leadership program, and they're all inquisitive. They're all ambitious. It just looks a little different because what they grew up with is a lot different.
Yeah.
I took my daughter with me on a business trip with a client, and it was insightful. I picked up a lot of tips from her from a training perspective. I was like, wow, a lot more training experience than I realized. I
Yeah.
think she hides how much stuff that she does, and everybody was impressed with her. And I'm just thinking, well, she's grown. She's not a kid anymore.
Well, and that's great.
Um,
And she was surrounded by parents that dug in and worked hard and those types of things. I guess what I was thinking about there's a lot of victim attitude out there, and
yes.
wanting it to come to them without the effort. And I just think that my wife wears a shirt and it's the Maryland's head coach, female's head coach, and I'm not going to remember her name right now. Handle hard better. Life's hard. You can either be
Yes.
handle hard now or hard later. And if you handle hard now, you don't have the hard later when you retire. You mentioned I say
That's so true.
a third of your life is working. First third of your life, and it's not necessarily a third, maybe it's a fourth or something. Well, no, it's about a third. A third of your life you sleep. A third of
Hmm.
your life, you're the first 20 years, your parents, if you've good, most people got a good family, you don't have a lot of the stresses, you're having food put on the table for you, you're getting your education, those types of things. And then the last part of that third is retirement, where you get to settle back down. And then you got this one big third that you just got to work your ass off. And if you work your ass off for a third of your life, the hard is a lot easier later in life. And
Oh, I agree.
it's just that's what I was kind of thinking about. My
I got
sisters,
you.
yeah, and we were talking about it. We've got I'm a younger kid compared to my siblings, so my kids are younger than theirs, and we're just watching people grow,
Gotcha.
and the social media stuff is what it gets me too. It's just perfection is not what you want for goal. First of all, they aren't perfect. They're
Yeah.
all about them, and it's a interesting. Well,
I think it's both. I actually think it's both because I think that fundamentally you can do extremely well because there are more resources,
sure.
tools, and
Oh yeah,
uses available. The other part of it is because of social media, there's so many different distractions, so on and so forth, that
yeah,
you have to
yeah,
be
yeah.
disciplined. And
That's
so
a
I
good
think if
point.
you can help kids be focused, laser focused, because even older adults play victimhood. And I
That's
think if you can
true.
help people
Yeah,
be
yeah.
focused on the right tools and resources that are so much more available than when we were available. I mean, if you didn't go, you don't have to go to the library now. The library
Dewey
can come to
Decimal, they
you.
don't even know what you're talking about when you say the Dewey
Right.
Decimal System. You used to have to go look up a
Exactly.
number, 4 digits plus a period, something, something, then go find that aisle, then go find that book, then read that book.
Yes.
You don't get a Google or Chat GPT, man. It's crazy.
Exactly.
Different problems.
Exactly.
There's a lot of problems we didn't deal with too. So I swear I'm not yelling, standing on my yard, get off my yard to all the neighbor kids yet. I haven't turned into that yet, but I'm well on my way probably. But well, I'll tell you, Keith, that the company just sounds absolutely awesome. Again, everybody's core management training. When we were getting together and talking about today, I want to make sure that you get any message for the listeners out there that you wanted to make sure you touched on. You got a lot going on, a great company, you focus in the life sciences. But first of all, how do people get a hold of you? And then do you have any last words, anything, message for the day that you want to make sure you get across to the listeners?
Yeah, Brent. So you can reach me at coremanagementtraining.com. And even if you're not life sciences and you have some leadership needs, happy to work with you. And my message would be this, Brent. I think that at the end of the day, you're the captain of your own ship. So
Great
if you
statement.
want things to change, then you must change. We kind of alluded to it earlier. There's so many tools and resources and things that are available. You have to be responsible for your own development. And if you spend time with your own self development, you will grow because
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily about it's more about the person you're trying to become than the person that you are now. And if you do the work now, as you said earlier, the results will show up. They may not show up today, and they may take a lot longer than you realize, but that consistency will develop you into a person that you won't recognize 5 years from now.
That's a great statement. You hit the nail on the head. What you don't change, you choose. I mean, if you don't change and you don't get better and you don't hold yourself to that, then you've chosen to stay stagnant and stay where you are, and not improve, and the rest is history. Hey, everybody,
Exactly.
we had Keith Willis on today, and again, it's Keith Willis with Core Management Training. Keith, great visit today. Everybody out there, take to heart what Keith said, and take it to the streets, be awesome, and then keep that shit up. Everybody, we'll talk next week. See ya.